On Sunday afternoon in Wisconsin, police shot Jacob Blake multiple times in front of his children. It's believed the police were responding to a domestic incident. Blake remains in hospital, alive but partially paralysed.
He shot my son 7 times.
The shootings reignited unrest and led to violent protests in Wisconsin. 2 protesters have been shot dead and another wounded, allegedly by a 17-year-old who travelled from interstate. He's now in police custody. With a federal civil rights investigation into the shooting of Jacob Blake underway, the state's NBA team, the Milwaukee Bucks, has boycotted its playoff game in solidarity.
Despite the overwhelming plea for change, there has been no action. So our focus today cannot be on basketball.
Dr. Andre Perry is an author and fellow at the Brookings Institution. He joined me earlier from New York. Dr. Perry, what's the significance of the NBA boycott in response to this latest shooting?
Well, the response is really an indication that people know their value and they're willing to step out on their value. They're willing to do what it takes in order to incite change. Status quo is unacceptable, but this goes back historically for decades. And so at some point, employees and employers need to essentially state that enough is enough, and this is the NBA's showing of that.
Is the shooting of Jacob Blake likely to have the same wave effect across the US as we saw earlier this year with the murder of George Floyd?
I believe so. I think we will see a rise in protests leading up to the election, because we know that if you really want to have a change in policy, that it must be accompanied by protests, that policy is not just going to change on its own. In fact, after the incidents of George Floyd and the protests thereafter, there was a number of policy changes in different cities because of the protests. I foresee that continuing. And so this is just a long, drawn out series of protests that is built to incite change in the White House and in policy.
America has lurched from tragedy to tragedy this year. In fact, you've got another potential disaster bearing down on you now with Hurricane Laura. It's the Republican convention this week with the looming presidential election. Politics is as toxic as it's ever been. Is this just a bad period in American history, or is it something more?
Yeah, I don't say anything is a coincidence. So I think that the lack of leadership, the lack of organization at the top is really manifesting itself in and at least in how we respond to these incidents. Typically, you would see a much more organized response to any kind of major national occurrence. But with this administration, you're simply not seeing the kind of response that unifies the country. As a result, you're seeing very splintered, disparate, chaotic events happening here and there, and they seem unrelated, but in actuality, they are related in a sense. There's been a lack of leadership in terms of addressing that. It seems like the President Trump has no interest in unifying the country and saying, no, it's not okay to shoot protesters. No, it's not okay to violate the law, the rights of citizens, everyday citizens. And we need that kind of leadership.
Dr. Perry, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.